Okay, welcome. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining us for our Earth Day in May panel discussion. My name is Helen Liu, and I'm the Programming and Partnerships Manager at Cary Library. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the Cary Library Foundation. Their support enables us to bring programs like tonight's event to you. This program is hosted in partnership with Lexington Climate Action Network, LexCAN, and the Town of Lexington's Sustainability and Resilience Office. This program is being recorded by Lex Media and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel as well as Lex Media's webpage. Tonight, we welcome you to a learning session focused on taking action. You'll come away with tools you'll need to take one step now for a more sustainable future. Our panel of Lexington residents are here to talk about the steps they have taken to share their experiences with home weatherization and heat pump installation, innovative waste reduction strategies, solar and battery storage installation, electric vehicle purchase and use, and natural landscaping practices. We will not be taking questions after the panel. Instead, we invite you to join us in the large meeting room where the panelists and other community leaders in sustainability will answer your questions during our tabling event, and that runs from 7:30 to 8:30. I'm now going to pass the mic to Maggie Peary, Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the Town of Lexington.
Thanks so much for being here. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a few thank yous to the many people who helped with this event tonight. First to Helen and the whole Cary Library for hosting us in this great room and downstairs. And then a huge thank you to LexCAN, who helped bring this group together. Mary Yardley, Ricky Papo, Janice Litwin, Pam Warren, Mandy Smith, Marcia Jen were all involved in the planning, so thank you all as well. And also to Lex Media for being here tonight to film, and the biggest thank you for our panelists who are here to impart their wisdom to you all. So we're excited to have you learn from your neighbors. This is entitled the Earth Day in May panel, so happy belated Earth Day. Lexington in April is a pretty busy time, as many of you know, with town meeting and school vacation, so I would say Earth Day in May is just as good. There's never a bad time to celebrate the earth. So on our theme tonight is Take One Step, and I think any of us who are thinking about some of these large environmental problems like climate change or the biodiversity crisis, it can be pretty overwhelming, and as one person it can feel scary to know how to approach it, and with so many demands on your time, a lot of people can get stuck and feel like there's no tangible solutions. So our goal tonight is to have everyone who's in the audience take away one step that they can do after the event, hopefully more. But these 5 Lexington residents will share one step that they took. Before I introduce our panelists, I'm going to make 3 plugs myself, one of steps you can take. So the first is LexCAN has put together a website called Energize Lexington, and it's a way where you can kind of get ideas of what actions you can take. And you can also log actions that you've already done. So we have sort of a town-wide tracking system. So there'll be information on that downstairs. The second plug I will make is another step you'll be able to take very shortly is the town is launching a town compost pilot. And that is opening for the first 2,000 households who sign up to have free curbside compost at their home. So on May 17th, at 9 a.m. on the town website, there'll be a sign-up sheet for that. So I encourage you to set a reminder in your calendar so you can be one of the first 2,000 to take advantage of that. The third plug I will make is please, after this event, join us downstairs. There's a lot more information there, and you'll be able to talk directly with some of our panelists and other leaders. So please join us afterwards. I will introduce our panelists. We have Leslie Hoyt, who is talking about her EV vehicle, or her electric vehicle, and kind of the process of purchasing that and using it. We have Charlie Wyman, who's talking about sustainable landscape principles. Joe Paddo, who's talking about his experience with solar and battery backup systems. And then Renee Steinberger, who is talking about some of her innovative zero waste solutions that she's using in her own life. And finally, Janice Litwin, who is talking about her transitioning her home to heat pumps. So with that, I will introduce first Leslie to go ahead and share. Oh, actually, one thing I'll say is each panelist is kind of going to introduce what the step is that they took, what information they gathered, and kind of how they approached that, and then finally leave us with one piece of advice, whether that's a barrier or what that very first step is. So that's kind of what you can expect from each of these panelists. So go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, how's this? Everyone hear me okay? All right, my first time doing this, so bear with me. I'm Leslie Hoyt, Lexington resident, and I'm not an expert, but the step I took is I bought my very first EV, non-fossil fuel burning car, and in doing so, I made a decision on behalf of our family to sell the last gas-powered vehicle. So our backup plan went away with my new dream car. Maybe without so much planning, I just naturally started gathering information. I was annoyingly asking my friends to borrow their EV cars for an hour and run errands and try them out. When we were on vacation, I took the opportunity to rent a hybrid car to see what that was like when the rental car gave us an option. And I also was annoyingly asking my friends that had gas-powered cars, like, in case this experiment goes bad, would you ever be willing to lend me your car and trade cars for a day? If I need to go to New York City and can't figure it out or something, and they of course said yes. And I did look into the home chargers, because that was the part that I just couldn't make sense of, like how do you charge it in your own house? So after I bothered all my friends and got all this information, it was time to pick a car. There are a lot of choices out there. I started by doing what you do when you look for a car, like which ones looked good to me, which ones I thought I would look cool in, and then I started realistically looking at what I could afford, which cut it down by a lot. I think the cheapest car out there is the Chevy, or most affordable car, I should say, is the Chevy Bolt. It's about $27,000, and then like if you want to spend a few $100,000, you can do that easily. So it's a big range. What I should have been looking at is the range of how many miles the car goes on one charge, because kind of, sort of, besides looking cool, that's all that matters. And they start at about 100 miles per charge, and they go up to 400. 300's a lot, like Tesla range, and take you up to like Middle of Maine and back. Like mine happens to be about 280. That I bought, and I charge it about every other week for 3 hours for $12. Like it's a lot. So it's less of a problem than it used to be. Because I still have a mom, I looked at the safety ratings. She kept saying, "What's the safety rating?" So I got a car with a 5-star safety rating, and I was looking at rebates, but I'll tell you later why I don't care about that so much anymore. So then, I had to choose the car. And I was just going under the policy that I brought my kids up when they were little, and now I tell them as adults, like, don't do what everyone else does. In this case, buy a Tesla. So I bought a car that I was more comfortable with, that I could afford a little better, that fit in with more of my needs and belief system. So I chose a Hyundai Kona, and because it was less affordable, I was able to get like that super package on top of it, so it has like the self-driving thing, which is amazing. Go for that. And the bigger wheels and air-conditioned seats, if you can believe it. So yeah, it goes 280 miles when it's warm out, but you need to know that's completely variable based on who's in the car. Like not 280 if your spouse is with you, or you have gardening tools with you, or the heat is on. So it's, you have to put it in eco mode and be by yourself to really find that out. And also it's a lot less in the winter, which fully charges at like 240 in the winter and 280 in the summer. But the cars are really smart and knows how to tell you. But yeah, it had 5 seats and 5-star rating and hatchback, and the dealer is down on Mass Ave, so I could even walk back if I needed to bring it there. So I looked at the home chargers. You could buy them on Amazon. It's either the Tesla kind or the non-Tesla kind. They're about $1,000. You can get an electrician to put it in your house for $500 to $1,000. And yeah, that was a very easy process. So advice I would give people is don't listen to the dealers when they talk about the rebates. Like they all say, you're gonna get the rebate, and that's not the case. Like the country is just figuring that out now. It depends on whether your car, when you bought it, that the battery, materials to make the battery came from the United States or not, and whether the car that you bought was manufactured in the United States. You also don't get it right away. I bought mine in January of this past January in 2023, which means in 2024 when I'm doing my taxes, I can submit a form, and depending on how the rules land then, I might get $7,500 back, but don't do it for the rebate. Do it because maybe it's the right thing to do. So my son, we have a son and a daughter. Our son is a graduate student up at UVM, and he lives north of Burlington, like 4-hour drive, and like how am I gonna continue to go see him was my biggest concern. And the answer is you still need to plan. Like you can just push a button in the car and it will say take you to the next station, but it doesn't mean while you're driving you can see that it's a fast charger or a slow charger or a free charger. Like the best thing to do is plan. It's a lot easier than it was even a year ago, but there's this growing network of chargers that work. And I went up to Maine this weekend, and the place I usually stop is that Kennebunkport Plaza, which used to just have Teslas. Whole row of charge point. I drove up, $12, 80% charged, went on my way. So the world is definitely changing. It's a lot easier, but I say plan ahead, use the internet, it's a piece of cake, find your stop. So I stop halfway up to Vermont, and we make the stop fun. It's not a burden. I always make sure I have a stop where there's a park where I can go for a walk for 20 minutes or get a really good cup of coffee. My stop is in the Walmart parking lot, so I get to meet all these really cool EV owners. I look forward to it. It's not a burden to me. So in closing, I'll tell you the benefits and my thoughts about it. So definitely savings in fuel cost, lower overall operating costs for the car. The car is more expensive, but over time, definitely less, you will save money. No tailpipe emissions, better for the planet Earth, anyone? Definitely better handling. It's like lower center of gravity, like huge heavy battery under the whole length of the car. Think of that. So it handles better, and it's so much faster. It reminds me of my Ninja blender. It's either on or it's off. It's like put your foot on the gas and it's like go. So it's not like a motor that has to get going. It's immediate, which is so much fun. I think it's more convenient. Like think of a gas pump in your garage. It's like I come home, stick it in, and then 4 hours later it's charged, and I do that every other week. And I drive around a good amount. And it's low maintenance costs. There's no motor to maintain. So you go once a year, and they check your brakes, and they look at the tires. That's it. In closing, I think that keeping up with technology can be challenging, but it's a lot of fun. I really, all the time, feel fortunate that I grew up in a generation where I grew up without much technology, but then I get to live through seeing how all of this technology is changing our lives, and I look forward to seeing what's next. You read articles about roads that self-charge the vehicles while you're driving on them, and I want to be a part of that.
There. Working? Yes. Okay. I'm Charlie Wyman, Lexington resident for a number of years, and involved in a local volunteer initiative called Lexington Living Landscapes. We've got a table downstairs. Happy to talk to you about what we do and what we offer. And I want to talk to you tonight about sustainable landscaping. And this is a journey that I've been on for some time. It really began in earnest 3 years ago as I learned more about the environmental harm that sort of typical suburban landscaping practices cause. And I realized that there were fairly simple steps I could take to minimize that harm, and also to create in my own yard small pockets of habitat that serve as refuges for wildlife and that support local ecosystems. You know, large conservation areas, and we have fortunately a number in Lexington, are very important, but so are the small refuges that connect them and that allow wildlife to move back and forth. Some of what I do takes a lot of time, and I'm a do-it-yourselfer, and I enjoy it, and it's actually been very rewarding. But there's a lot you can do, I learned, that takes actually less time than you spend now, because you stop doing things that were either pointless or causing harm, and it's easy to stop them, and the world doesn't come to an end. So what do I do? I've learned to appreciate a slightly messy look. You know, in the messiness at the edges of your yard and in your flower beds and so forth and so on, there's a lot of nature that lives and thrives. And if we groom the yard too much, you lose that. Now, we all have neighbors who love very groomed yards and looks, and who might wish that we groomed our yards just as much. And one way I've dealt with that is to sort of let them know that what I'm doing is intentional, that I'm not just being lazy. And so I have a sign, a yard sign that I picked up that says pollinator habitat. What does it say? This pesticide-free garden provides food and shelter for insect pollinators. So it lets them know why, to some extent, it looks that way. Another way you can do it is if you're letting part of the yard go, you know, just mow an edge to the front path or along the driveway that sort of indicates that you're not being slovenly, that you're, you know, this is intentional what you're doing. So what am I doing? Well, how did I go about this? I read a lot, and there's a ton of good information out there. And I have a handout that you can pick up afterwards that directs you to a lot of places where you can learn how to do this. It's really quite simple. And the Lexington Urban Landscapes website has a lot of this information. So what do I do? On my own lawn, and I do have some lawn, first I just stopped using chemicals. I hardly ever used pesticides even before, but I just stopped fertilizing. You know, fertilizer and pesticides especially, they run off into our waterways and cause environmental harm that way. There's energy and environmental disruption that goes into their production, you know, far away. Some of the chemicals that people put on their lawns, they're endocrine disruptors. They have other health impacts on our children, on our pets. And you can really have a very nice yard without using them at all. Instead, what I do is I stop taking off the nutrients that one was putting back on in the chemical fertilizer. So I never bag my grass anymore. I just cut it and let it rot. It returns that nitrogen especially, but other nutrients to the soil, less time. In the fall, I mow the leaves when they fall on the lawn. You know, generally you can't leave leaves to just, if you leave them all winter, they'll rot the grass underneath. But I found that just one pass of the mower, when the leaves aren't too thick on the lawn, will break it up enough so that the little pieces fall between the grass blades. And again, fertilizer for the lawn. I mow higher and less often. I set my mower to the highest level I can. That does a couple of things. The higher grass lets less sunlight reach the ground surface, so weeds are less likely to get a start. The longer the grass blades, generally, the longer the roots. And so by having longer grass blades, you're helping the lawn be more drought resistant. Last summer, with the drought we had, I watered my lawn twice during the summer when it seemed particularly dry. And it came through just fine. It was green, frankly, most of the summer. I've got to think those roots are getting down deep. I use an electric mower. This is, you know, another way of doing sustainable landscape. I have an Ego. I have an Ego that, I'm proud to have an electric mower, but the brand is Ego, and it's wonderful, and it's quiet. I'm not breathing in fumes, and it's easy to operate, and no gas-powered mower. motor to worry about maintaining. And because the roots are deep, I mentioned I water less, which saves water. So that's the lawn. Elsewhere, I leave the leaves. You've probably heard that phrase, leave the leaves. It's become common to the sustainable landscaping movement. And so they just sit. I don't have to rake them up out of the, I don't have to put in mulch. It's a natural mulch. There are lots of critters that live in those leaves and overwinter in those leaves, which is very helpful for the environment and wildlife. And it's just, I think last year on our quarter-acre lot, I sent 1 bag of leaves to Hartwell, whereas 10 years ago I sent 15 maybe. I don't use pesticides and very little fertilizer in the flower beds and in my vegetable garden, a little more in the vegetable garden in terms of fertilizer, but no pesticides. If you do away with pesticides, you can develop a sort of natural community of insects and encourage the parasites and the predators that will keep your pests in check. So I find it's rare that a pest population gets out of hand in my yard. Is there anything else I want to add? That's largely it. So those are all things that save you time, that you can start doing tomorrow and you'll have more time for things you enjoy doing. If part of that is gardening and landscaping, then there certainly are things you can do in terms of reducing the area of lawn, putting in more native plants. I've done some of that, and I find it richly rewarding. A couple of years ago, I installed a row of pollinator plants along the driveway. I've always thought that it would be lovely to drive in and just walk along and see all the activity and see the flowers blooming. And I have to say, it's even better than I thought it would be. I go out in the morning to pick up the paper, and the bumblebees are just going nuts out there, and it's just wonderful to see and very rewarding. So I think that's all I wanted to share. Again, I've got a page that has a number of references on it that happy to share afterwards. Come down to our table and we can talk all you want.
So good evening, I'm Joe Pato, and I want to tell you 2 things about myself before I really start. One is, I'm the chair of the select board, and I've been actively involved in sustainability efforts for over 10 years in Lexington. And I kind of think of myself as a zealot for making us do things as a community. And the second thing is that professionally I'm a retired computer scientist. My work was in industry, primarily in academia, and the research was always building things. So one of the key core concepts we had was eat your own dog food. So you take those 2 things together and say, you're trying to pass legislation, local or state or national, that is going to cause people to do things, you better do it yourself and figure out what it's going to be like. So a little over 10 years ago, I started on an odyssey of my own to try to get my 1996 colonial home to be net zero. This house was built before net zero really was a concept anybody was working toward, and my builder certainly had no concept of what that might be. So while it's relatively new, it didn't have a whole lot of energy efficiency built into it or anticipated moving forward. I've done a whole bunch of things from audits, adding insulation. Today I'm going to talk about the easy stuff. They talk about things they actually had to do. I'm going to talk to you about our solar panels and battery backup system. And the great thing about both of those is I do nothing. We had 2 different companies do the work. So one key thing to take away is it doesn't have to be done all at once. It can be done in stages. And it started a while back. So the solar panels were installed through a program that Lexington ran, Solarize Lexington, that made it really easy. The vendor was pre-certified for the community, and the more households that got into the program, the cheaper it was for everybody. At that time, which was 2018, well, see, it's 8.5 years ago now. I had looked into putting in panels a few years earlier through a PPA program where you, instead of buying panels, you're leasing them and you're buying the power. The vendors at that time said, well, the panels really aren't efficient enough for where you are, so it doesn't make sense. A couple of years later, which is now 8.5, 9 years ago, they were more efficient, and in the fact that my house is at the bottom of Independence Hill, which is to the west of me immediately, and so like it slopes up pretty quickly, my evening dusk starts a couple of hours early because the sun sets behind the hill. As of 8.5, 9 years ago, the panels were efficient enough that it made sense to go ahead and install them. So we went through the program to install them. We took a look at what our power consumption was in the house, and without doing anything odd on the roof, we're able to get about 87–90% of our energy consumption. Not anymore, but not anymore because I've been doing more things like an EV, heat pumps. So I'm using a whole lot more electricity, but I'm still getting a lot of it coming from those solar panels. As far as what did I do to investigate, for me it was easy because Lexington had done the work for me and LexCAN had done a lot of the setup for getting the Solarized program in place, and a couple of other key advocates. Today there's just so much more out there, it's relatively easy to speak to a couple of the installing companies and get a system for you. One of the things that really helped for us was we got a production guarantee associated with what we purchased. So if the engineer made a calculation error in the design, which he did, we're still getting the full value because the company's paying us for that 5% that we missed. So the solar panels just work. I have monitors that are, because I'm a data guy, I track exactly how much they're producing and when, and have all these nice little graphs and spreadsheets. But it effectively just runs. Again, because of my situation where we have this hill coming back, we implemented microinverters for the system instead of a single inverter because we wanted to make sure that as that shadow of the hillside started grabbing the lower panels on the roof, it wasn't going to reduce the production throughout. And that's been great. We've had minor maintenance done because there's 31 panels and each panel has a microinverter, and it turns out, well, they sort of have a mean life before they fail. And pretty much every year, one of those 31 units decides to go out. The company who sold us the system comes and replaces it at under warranty, and it's 20 years of warranty. Great. The one thing that had gotten me really sort of, not annoyed, but kicking myself is they installed the solar panels, and it took about 2 months before the power that was being generated by the solar panels was actually coming into my house, because Eversource needed to come and put in the meter and to allow interconnectivity. So that power was all being wasted. And whenever there was a power outage, the exact same thing happened. So even though I'm having all this power coming in, there's a circuit that detects that, oh, there's an outage, so we're not going to keep power running into the house. It goes to ground. Batteries. Batteries make it so you can create an island and have power when there's a power failure in your area. So in 2019, batteries had come along enough so that it wasn't unreasonable to have them installed, and there was a program that the state had initiated that the utilities were using called Connected Solutions, which would pay you during high power consumption months for drawing power from your batteries into the grid. So what happens is during, typically it's like 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 in the evening, in the summer days when it's a hot day, peak power consumption is anticipated by the utility, they draw power from my batteries and pay me for it. Because of that, I said, well, instead of just buying one, let's buy 2. That's enough to run my house for 24 hours if there's a protracted power outage, and over a couple of years, the second battery is being paid for by the Connected Solutions program. Being an early adopter on these things, when I did this, there were only 2 companies that were in the program. One of them was Tesla. I know we're going to mention other companies, but the Tesla was the only one that I could get installed. So again, the research part was really easy because it was, do you want batteries or not? So they took a little while to get integrated into the program, but they got it going. And unlike all the other 8 which are now available, and if you're interested in batteries, go to where the Eversource utility service area, on their website, do a search for Connected Solutions, and they'll give you all the information about how that works for batteries. And we'll list the 8 vendors, the types of battery suppliers that are certified to participate in the program. Your batteries will have a certain storage capacity, and the system will draw about down to 20% load on your battery, so that you always have some backup capability. And almost all of the outages we have tend to be 5-10 minutes long, so 20% of batteries is plenty. But the Eversource was paying $275 for each kilowatt that they, on average, consume over the summer. So for a typical house, that would be, I think it's $1,300 a year. Unlike all the other vendors, Tesla says we're partners in making this power grid option. So you take 50%, then we'll take 50%. So when you look at an installation, that's one of the things to keep in mind is make sure you look at what the agreements are for how they participate in the service. That said, it's been outstanding. We've had a number of failures. My house has only had one time where we had more than 24 hours of outage. That was back in the Halloween snowstorm we had years ago. But for some reason, we were having 5-minute outages like every other week. And after having the batteries in, it's just there's no more blinking clocks. It switches the power supply to the battery system. During the day, you're getting power coming off of your solar panels through the batteries in, so if there's outage, they're being charged even though you're consuming power locally. So it's just a very convenient system. All the vendors come with some sort of app-based system where you can control and decide how much of the power you want to make sure you have on reserve and how much not. When there is a storm that's forecast by the National Weather Service for our area, the system automatically fully charges itself from the grid so that you will have 100% battery capacity, assuming that there'll be an outage coming. And once the storm is passed, it turns off the storm mode, and then you use power off of your battery until it goes back to what levels we were at. So the net of it is, what we did was easy for us. We have the installers come in. We don't have to think about it. I do look at it every day, but that's only because I really like data and try to figure out how efficient it is being today. But as a homeowner, you really need do nothing. And what you walk away with is the comfort that you're going to be sustained through power outages. If you have heavy loads like heat pumps, those are typically installed on a circuit that's disconnected from the battery so it doesn't draw it down quickly. But all of your critical your refrigerators, others, even cooking services are all covered. So it was easy, and it gave us a whole lot of comfort in knowing that we're being resilient. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm here to talk about zero waste, and I'm super excited about this topic, and enjoy it as much as I enjoy talking about it. So shortly after college, I received a scholarship to study environmental business. And so it's kind of fascinating to me to think that I've learned a lot about my zero waste principles from my daughter. So I'd like to share a brief story with you. So we were having a conversation, it was the spring of 2019, and we were planning her birthday party. And so I went through the list of, okay, we're gonna get this food, we're gonna get, these drinks and so on. And I said, yeah, and I'll get a case of water bottles. And she said, Mom, we don't do that. Like, why are you getting that? I'm like, I understand, but I'm really busy, and it just needs to be easy, it needs to happen. And she said, I bet you if you ask the place, they maybe could figure out like a solution for us, or do they have something? And I just completely ignored her, went and got the water, we had the party. And after the fact, I was there and I realized, wow, they have a full kitchen. Like I could have easily gotten pitchers and glasses and things like that. And so it dawned on me, like it's just me that needs to slow down, think about things differently, and I could have easily hosted a low waste party right then and there. And so, I was amazed that, like, as the saying goes, like, there's so much that we can learn from our children. And so, jumping maybe 6 months later, so Hien, Wen, and myself, we co-founded Lex Zero Waste here in Lexington. It is a nonprofit organization along with Janet Kern, our treasurer, Mark Manasses, who is our clerk. And we have an incredibly knowledgeable working group that we work with as well. And Lex Zero Waste is a nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness and taking action to address the impacts of our consumption choices and the well-being of the earth and all life on it. And so here's a brief summary of some of the things that we're doing with our current programming, but I invite you to come afterwards to our table so we can answer any questions and discuss this in further detail. So first off, we have LexSort. This is a partnering program with the town of Lexington for free composting drop-off sites here. We've got Zero to Go, which is a reusable takeout program with Royal India Bistro. You can get your takeout in stainless steel containers with silicone lids. We're also partnering with the Monroe Center for the Arts. This is the third year in a row. We do advocacy through art. And the current art sculpture that we have is that we are collecting aseptic containers. So this would be milk, juice containers, as well as Tetra Paks, almond milk containers, or those soup containers, because these items are not recyclable. We're also collecting crisp bags and any food wrappers that are not recyclable. And we also want to draw attention to that many of these items can be harmful to our health as well. Okay. So what are some of the things that I've done personally for zero waste? So as an adult, in my adult life, I've chosen to not have a clothes dryer. So I just hang everything up, stick it outside, works great. I do love doing Black Earth curbside composting. I started November 1st, 2019. There's a dashboard so I can get all this really fun information, and super excited. My family and I, we've diverted 2,106 pounds of compost. And with that, they've been able to plant roughly 272 seedlings. Super, super excited. We have Center Goods now in Lexington. Great place to shop if you haven't been there. They're located at 30 Waltham Street. Highly recommend you check them out. And I've also started shopping at Deborah's Natural Gourmet. They have a refillery. And it's the first time that I can look at my pantry and feel like, wow, like you're actually looking like those books that tell you how to be zero waste. So really excited about that. I think we're also really grateful in this area to have CSAs and farmers markets that we can buy products that are not packaged in plastic. So what brings me to the topic of what is one new thing that I'm doing for zero waste is namely to not buy anything new for 1 year unless I really need it. So 4 years after the water bottle story, so I am in the parking lot of the New Balance running store. And I say to my daughter, okay, I'm just gonna run in because I'd love to buy another vest. And she says, Mom, how many vests do you have? I'm like, well, I've got 5, but I only have 2 of this kind. And it's super fantastic. It's like really long, and I'm always cold. It's great. And she's like, you don't need another vest. And so she says, I'm staying in the car. So I go in, come back completely disappointed because they don't have these vests, right? But that night, I got home and I realized, wow, like, I'm really embarrassed. Like, she's totally right. I did not need another item. And so, well, what am I going to do? I said, okay, challenge yourself. For 1 year, don't purchase anything. And so I'm actually quite amazed at what I've learned about myself. And so I would have previously professed to not like shopping. I realized that there are certain things that I do like to shop for. And what it means to live in a consumer society. And so according to the Cambridge Online Dictionary, a consumer society is a society in which people often buy new goods, especially goods they don't need, and in which a high value is placed on owning many things. Okay. So it's been a process, learning all the way. So one of the things that also stumped me is we were in the Florida Keys, and we were at this really cute boutique, and I saw this really cute rainbow jellyfish sun shirt. And I said to my girls, do you want it? And they're like, no, Mom, don't need it, right? And my response was like, are you sure? And I was like, whoa, like I was so shocked that I would say, are you sure? And so I realized, like, what is shopping? What is shopping on vacation? It's like, oh, it's all of these things that I can't really get from home, or if I purchase that item and I bring it home, I'll look at it and it'll make me have sort of that vacation feel again, right? So there's so many things associated with the things that we buy. So anyway, no, sun shirts, cute sandals, or a round of t-shirts for everyone. And I'd like to say in all of this drama, right, from someone who knows that it takes roughly 715 gallons of water to make just one t-shirt, which is about 900, which is enough water for one person to drink for 900 days. And that's not including all the packaging and transportation that go into these items. So as we celebrate Earth Day here today, this evening, I'm sure that each and every one of you, in your own way, are taking actions to protect the environment. My story tonight is a chronicle of what I've been doing and one of my latest things. To reduce my footprint. The other day I heard an announcer on the radio say, to commemorate Earth Day this year, if every person were to do one more thing to help protect the Earth, that would be billions of things. So I invite you tonight to consider what your next one thing could be. Thank you.
My name's Janice Litwin, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about heat pumps and weatherization. And I will say that while we were told to say what was the one step we took, ours was a little more like a flying leap without a net, because early in 2022, we replaced our entire HVAC system with air source heat pumps. And in the process, took out our furnace, took out our oil tank, took out our central air condenser, and the room air conditioners that we still needed upstairs, and completely gone. So we had our first big test of it, let me say, this past winter when we had that Arctic blast that came through, and it was about 20 below, and I should tell you, they held firm. We had bought a couple of space heaters just in case, and we never had to turn them on. So the motivation for doing this was that I'd gotten involved in LexCAN, and the Earth is in crisis, and we should be cleaner. And at the same time, the timing was good because we had the original oil tank from when the house was built in 1952. Our air conditioner was reaching the end of its life, and nobody right now should be buying a new oil tank and furnace the way things are going. So the timing was good. But in the course of it, what I learned is that in addition to being good for the planet, that heat pumps are really so much more efficient and effective in many ways than traditional HVAC. For one thing, as some of you may know, and some of the basics, instead of generating power through combustion, much of which ends up going up through your chimney, it transfers heat from the outside to the inside, or in the summer from the inside to the outside. And that's because warm air goes to cold. And even when it is 0 outside, there's still some warmer air to pull in because the refrigerant inside a heat pump, an air source heat pump, is at -30. So we can tell you that it actually works. The other thing that was so great that we learned, and it took some getting used to, is that whereas if you've got a conventional HVAC fossil fuel system, it tends to be either full blast on or full blast off based on what the thermostat is telling you. So it's either blasting on, and if ours was like our house, you hear the big bang when it turned on and the bang when it turned off. The heat pumps modulate. They have a converter that can go at variable speed so that in real time, it's giving you just the amount of heat or cool that you need to fill your space. And it's doing it silently, which is what we weren't expecting and actually took a little while to get used to. So I will say they worked in the winter, and I'll tell you that last summer was life-changing in our house, just the air conditioning alone. So what did we do to prepare for that? The first thing we did is that we called Mass Save in order to get an energy assessment and do some weatherization. There are tremendous rebates for heat pumps, but whether you get one or not, if you haven't had a Mass Save assessment lately, you really ought to get one. And most of what they will do to tighten up your house, you aren't paying for, it's all covered. And so we had quite a bit of insulation put in and a lot of air sealant to tighten up the house. So then I did a lot of research. I spent probably 4 months looking into trying to get a basic understanding of how heat pumps work, what kinds of heat pumps there are, what were the most important things to know about them, some of those being that you need to assess what your ductwork is like, on whether or not with air source you can use the existing ductwork or not, looking at the importance of the size. The key thing is that the size of a heat pump system has to match your heating load in your house. So I did all of that research. I looked into what all of the rebates were, which were tremendous. As many of you probably know, if you convert your whole house to heat pumps, even if you keep a fossil fuel system there just as a backup, you get $10,000 off the cost of installing the heat pump. I talked to somebody the other day who ended up spending about $2,000 for their heat pumps because of that whole house rebate. We sought a lot of recommendations of good installers, and then we met with probably too many. We met with 6 installers who came out. This is before there were lists of good people and a lot of those resources. And each one of them had a slightly different approach in our very challenging situation. Our house was not an easy house to figure out. And I learned something from each one of them. They were all thoughtful proposals, and we're very happy with the one that we went with. And one thing I will tell you right now is that you won't have to do the 4 months of research, because now Lexington has the wonderful Heat Smart program, which I'll tell you a little more about, which is funded by Mass Save and the town of Lexington. And there are trained volunteer Heat Smart advisors, of which I'm one of 8 in the initial cohort, who are deeply trained to work as volunteers individually with people who are interested in converting to heat pumps. And so I will, in a moment, tell you how you can access that. So a lot of that research will have already been done for you instead of your having to do it from the start. So I have a couple of pieces of advice. One, which Ricky Capo from LexCAN reminded me, which is please don't wait until your HVAC system is about to break or fall apart before you look into heat pumps. I actually had one meeting with a HeatSmart client who at the very last minute last week had to reschedule, and by last minute I mean an hour before we were due to talk, because his oil tank had sprung a leak. And when you're in that kind of an emergency, you have no choice, especially if it's cold out, to put in a new one. So try to plan ahead and not have that happen. Another piece of advice is don't go immediately with the first proposal you get for heat pumps, no matter how good it seems and how reasonable. There will be different approaches, and it's really important to look at several. I would say a minimum of 3. And this, I think, is all the more important because there are a lot of traditional, conventional HVAC companies that have recently jumped into the heat pump world. They jumped on that wagon, and some of them are very good, but some of them aren't really fully knowledgeable. They're most comfortable with what they know, which is the conventional systems. At the very most, they will probably want to make sure that you're doing a dual fuel system, which means that at some certain temperature you can still switch over to your oil or your gas. And so I would ask them, how long have you been installing heat pumps, and how much of your business is that? And you might get some interesting answers from that. So the next steps, I've got 2 immediate next steps, one of which is to, if you haven't had a Mass Save assessment lately, to get on to look up Mass Save. I think there are 10 contractors that can do the assessments in the works, and do it. And the other, which you can do in 5 minutes from now, is to please go downstairs right after this talk. And the second table on the left, when you enter that room, is for the HeatSmart program. And a couple of us are there with our computers, and you can actually sign up for the program, for which everything is free. And if you don't have time to do that, you can go home and get on your computer and just Google in Lexington HeatSmart, and you'll get to the website easily that way under Remote Energy Management. So thank you.
I hope you all found that as inspiring as I did. I know I learned something from every single one of you, so thank you for sharing that with us. I encourage you all to make your way downstairs. You can talk to all of our panelists and a lot of other leaders in sustainability in the town to help you take away that one step you're going to do after tonight. And there's also a contact sheet at my table that has email addresses and websites for everyone who's sharing information tonight, so you can take that with you and follow up with questions. But thank you all so much for coming. Let's give one more round of applause for our panelists.